The year 2000 was a special time to be an avid watcher of Cartoon Network. The start of the new millennium brought with it a multitude of now legendary shows in the midst of their primes, such as Courage the Cowardly Dog, the Powerpuff Girls, and Ed, Edd n Eddy, and was only a few years away from introducing a fresh lineup of what would become beloved and critically acclaimed cartoons in Teen Titans, Samurai Jack, and a plethora of others. With Cartoon Network fully invested at the time in pushing their original programming, they were also beginning to dip into repurposing their massive catalog of Hanna-Barbera properties into new productions, featuring classic characters and bumpers, original shows, and even the occasional, unexpected crossover. Curiously, one of the most involved projects of that era is also the least known, the hour-long animated special, The Flintstones on the Rocks. A lack of familiarity with this title isn't unwarranted, as it only ever aired twice, when it debuted on Cartoon Network in 2001 and on Japanese television in 2002, never to be replayed again, for reasons that have officially gone unstated, but could be potentially related to its more adult leanings, including a plot centered around marital issues and an abundance of innuendos plastered throughout the 60-minute runtime. Whatever the reason, Cartoon Network seems to be happy letting this movie remain unearthed. Does its quality prove the deciding brain trust correct? Or has the public been missing out on one of the best chapters in the family's history? Let's leave no stone unturned and look at the Flintstones on the Rocks. The special begins on a surprising scene, with Fred and Wilma on their couch undergoing marriage counseling, the clock ticking loudly over their tense silence, before Wilma voices her dissatisfaction with Fred's lack of passion in their relationship, feeling like she doesn't exist to him, to which Fred loudly remarks, "Oh, you exist all right, Wilma. You exist." It's a fight that feels like it had been building up for years, and all the squabbling they did in the original series has been carried over and finally let out here. It's a novel take on an animated institution, and the anticipation to see how far they're willing to go with this is at an early boiling point already. Scribbling notes on a stone slab is their counselor, Dr. Schwarzenquartz, a nice nod to the rock-themed puns of the original show, and a signal as to how faithful this version of the Flintstones is to their original counterparts, which extends to the art as well, specifically the backgrounds. Gradient grays and lines cover the inside of the Flintstones' home, perfectly embodying the look and feel of the 1960s series. The characters themselves retain their Hanna-Barbera designs, but with the artistic influence of co-director Chris Savino, whose signature style can be seen in the 2001 revival of Dexter's Laboratory and My Partner's a Gym Monkey. Fred and Wilma's proportions look slightly different, but still manage to successfully capture the essence of the original Flintstones. The updated look against the mimicked iconic backdrop is a refreshing and respectful mix of old and new. The argument the couple are engaged in, however, is anything but respectful, as Wilma yells at Fred to shut up. It's not a hugely offensive thing to yell, but to see a couple that millions of people have grown up with, knowing them as wholesome, to hear them talk to each other in this way, lets you know this is an entirely new Stone Age we're in. The therapist asks them to reenact a typical night at home for the two, and Fred makes Wilma out to be a ditzy loafer, and Wilma portrays Fred to be an insensitive, demanding oaf. And any hopes of civility between them goes out the window when Fred reveals that Wilma isn't a natural redhead, resulting in Wilma lunging at him and bashing him on the head, and an exciting opening credits scene and a sign of the depravity to come. Next, we see Fred at work, totally jaded, unable to properly slide down the dinosaur's tail as he would have in happier times. He goes into his boss, Mr. Slate's office, anticipating a promotion, but instead finds that it's being given to Barney. Insult is added to injury on the car ride home, with Barney talking about his new advancement, before Fred has finally had enough and screams, "Shut up," and the shrill, near cracking in his voice puts it over the top. He drops Barney off, reviled at the Rubble's perfect marriage, and even his own familiar routines have become mundane to him. Dino no longer jumps on Fred, and Fred doesn't tell him to get off. Instead, their back and forth is now a muttered formality, which is honestly a bit sad to see. that another ritual we grew to love from this family isn't the same fun interaction for these characters anymore. Fred returns home to a miserably silent dinner with Wilma, though him casually eating his giant-sized steak with both hands is a funny visual, before being interrupted by a knock on the door from Betty and Barney, celebrating Fred and Wilma's anniversary. Rather than take part in the festivities though, they accuse each other of forgetting their special day. And that tells you everything you need to know about the state of their relationship. Although they both forgot about their wedding anniversary, they're more interested in getting the upper hand in their fight rather than enjoying the occasion. But their argument is halted when Barney informs them that as a gift, they'll be going on a couple's vacation to beautiful Rockapulco. Another great rock-themed pun, all on the rebel's dime, causing Fred's animosity towards his friend to about-face into jovial camaraderie. For as different as things are in this special, it's nice to know Fred being a skinflint will never change. The next day, Fred begins to drive the group to Rockapulco and sees a brunette cave woman in the vehicle next to him. Emphasis on the word sees, because he takes in every inch he can of this woman to as far down as his eyes can reach. He enjoys the view enough to puff out his chest, catching her attention, who looks over to him in the most wall-eyed head turn, her mouth hanging agape and a dazed expression pasted on her face. Things get weirder and an escalating exchange of flirtatious looks. He raises his eyebrows, she winks. He growls, she purrs back. He licks his teeth, and she blows him a kiss before taking the bone out of her hair, laughing as she drives off. It's a decidedly suggestive interchange, despite Fred being past his prime and the woman appearing borderline unhinged. It's a fun homage to the vacation films, where Clark Griswold and a woman in a Ferrari share teasing glances at each other. Only here, it creeps towards the edge of sheer lunacy. A dream sequence follows, and with the scene change, so does the animation, now fully done in stop motion. In this fantasy, Fred bowls a perfect game, and when he saunters over to accept his trophy from the recently encountered brunette, his competitor kidnaps both prizes before being foiled by Fred's perfect bowling. And to celebrate, he and his dream girl dance atop a bowling ball with 3 X's behind them, a reference to a turkey, or 3 strikes in bowling. But I have a feeling it's more likely alluding to its alternative, sultry meaning. The brief change in style was not the direction I would have anticipated the scene transitioning into. It isn't necessary in the slightest, but it's done so well. The characters look fantastic, and it's a neat way to differentiate fantasy from reality, and ends as one of the most memorable sections here. They arrive at their hotel, La Cueva Grande, in Rockapulco, and the sign written in Spanish confuses Fred. Barney informs him that they speak Spanish in Rockapulco, and it causes Fred to violently shake as he turns his head, his face reddening to a rageful hue. The level of visible anger Fred jumps to is outrageous, offset by Barney weakly begging, "Please no," capping off one of the funniest scenes in the special. Meanwhile, a shadowy figure lurks through the night using inventive ancient tools to rob a jewelry store, stealing an enormous diamond necklace. And during this, Fred attempts to check into the hotel, believing he's mastered the Spanish language by speaking slowly and loudly at the exasperated desk clerk. By this time, the thief is running through the hotel lobby with the necklace in his yellow bag, bumping into Wilma, who happens to drop an identical bag that she was carrying. The typical mix-up of bags is next, and they lampoon the absurdity of this trope to a ridiculous degree. Fred picks up the bags off the ground, noting how similar they are, then proceeds to juggle them, commenting that he'd hate to get the two mixed up, as he cackles maniacally in another gloriously bizarre moment. And of course, Fred accidentally gives him the wrong bag, and the thief devises a way to get the one with his necklace back. Once inside the hotel room, Barney gives Fred a tour, showing him the fancy hot and cold option shower, which is really one mammoth standing in boiling liquid and the other frozen in an ice block, and also a fountain located next to the toilet, which has a mammoth's trunk sticking straight up spurting water that Barney drinks from. not realizing it's actually a bidet, which is simultaneously hilarious and the grossest sight I've seen in some time. The awkwardness of the tour comes to a head when Barney inserts a coin into the bed, activating the vibration function. Watching Barney get a thrill from sitting on the shaking mattress is the point where anyone in their right mind would give up trying to guess what to expect from the special and to accept that nothing is off limits. And that mindset is absolutely necessary, because next is the most risque scene in the entire special, where Wilma tries to get Fred in the mood for romance by literally letting her hair down as she presses against the bedroom wall in a barely there two-piece pelt, in a way we've never seen from her before. But even standing directly in his eye line doesn't help him get the hint, leaving the two of them lying in anger to the sound of the Rubble's bed vibrating next door. Seeing the Flintstones make these types of jokes is surreal, based solely on how brazen they are with the subject matter. But as strange as it might sound, none of them come across as all that off-brand. The original series had its fair share of body humor, and while the amount here is clearly at a pace unseen in the history of the franchise, it still doesn't feel wholly unnatural, coming off as almost the logical next step towards a more adult Flintstones cartoon. The next morning, the couples get ready for a day of sightseeing, and the thief sneaks in to take back his bag. Fred, who's taking a shower, asks who he believes to be Wilma to loofah him up, until the thief loses the sponge in a place he hadn't reached. Just when I think every possible avenue for being unsettled has been exhausted, they manage to find another way. After a day full of activities, Fred and Barney stop at a tower viewer. While Fred takes in the sights, he gets sentimental and thanks Barney for everything he's done for him, not noticing he's pouring his heart out to a total stranger. His frustration builds and he explodes at Barney, and out of embarrassment for sharing his feelings, he also states that he only yells at Wilma because she doesn't hear very well, which is such a revealing look into his psyche that he's so guilt-ridden about how he treats her, he impulsively defends his treatment of her, totally unprompted. The two men notice their wives shopping, providing Fred with the perfect opportunity to show off his haggling skills. But the good intentions end with Wilma returning to their hotel room after having to bail him out of jail. I love that they could have just made him supremely inept, but they also added the unnecessary detail of him getting arrested. It makes the fact that he's mad at Wilma for being mad at him all the more ridiculous. In the most shocking scene, Wilma declares to Fred that they're over as she packs her suitcase, saying she never wants to see him again. Normally, this would be a minor bump that they would smooth over, but here, nothing feels off the table. So the prospect that Wilma could leave Fred is very real, and there's something instinctively upsetting about that. All is forgiven though when Wilma stumbles across the stolen diamond in her suitcase, assuming it's a gift from Fred, who's too dumbfounded to correct her. When Fred tells Barney he doesn't know where the diamond came from, he's urged to do the right thing, which to him is go along with the lie. This works in Fred's favor, leading to him and Wilma making eyes at each other during dinner, and it is disturbing. Slowly chewing and sucking down various dishes in ravenous and animalistic ways, even kissing their food and producing pleasurable sounds shows that they're relishing the meal beyond mere taste. And I would never have thought that I could be as repulsed as I was from watching these two eat, and as ashamed as I am to admit it, Fred choking on his food, stopping this madness, was a huge relief. We also get to see the diamond cause a strain in the Rubble's relationship, when Betty gets jealous that Barney isn't pampering her in the same way, and oddly enough, it is sort of nice to know that there are some flaws in their seemingly otherwise perfect marriage. The next day as the women sit poolside, their husbands come out in quite revealing swimsuits, causing their wives to shudder and sickening the surrounding hotel guests. I like that it's both Fred and Barney in this instance, not just Fred making a fool of himself. It reinforces that despite Fred's more surly personality, they're still the best of friends through everything, no matter how misguided. The women see the secret thief, who we now know as Xavier, drop his robe and impress the women with his class. In a surprisingly sweet moment, Betty eyes the man, mentioning to Wilma some women have all the luck, and Wilma looks lovingly at her disheveled husband and agrees. For as combative as their relationship has been before and during the trip, it's actually quite heartwarming to see the love between them is still there, though credit does go to the diamond for helping to rediscover that adoration. More scarring imagery follows when Wilma sits on Fred's back and massages sunscreen onto his sunburn. Watching her rub his back from behind is so uncomfortable. The way his body looks and how big he is compared to her, and the lotion being molded into a heart on his hairy back, hearing the sloshing sound, it's strangely impressive how this team can make even the most ordinary actions severely unnerving. When Wilma again complains to Fred that he doesn't put effort into their relationship, he uses the diamond as proof of his attentiveness, putting her in a catch-22, knowing if she argues, she'll appear ungrateful, and the only other alternative being to stay silent. It's a manipulative way to weaponize the gift, and to me, is the worst thing Fred has done to this point. A monkey bellhop delivers a note for Wilma from Xavier, and asks her to meet him at the cantina and wear her beautiful diamond necklace, his words enticing enough to leave her clutching the door in awe. She gets all dolled up as Fred sleeps and meets with Xavier, and the first thing she does is slap him, demanding to know how he got her name and room number, because that must be against hotel policy, which is something I've always personally wondered in movies. How does somebody get all that sensitive information with little to no trouble? I can't believe it took the Flintstones to ask this, but I'm glad somebody finally did. Xavier rebounds and lays the charm on Wilma, to the point where her knees wobble and she falls onto her back. I take it as meaning he's made her weak in the knees, but just how weak? That's up to the discernment of the viewer. As Wilma enjoys her evening, Fred stands around the room quietly pondering where he went wrong. It's sort of depressing to see his lonely introspection, but it does prompt him into putting on his best tuxedo and bringing a single flower for Wilma, but sees Xavier pitching woo and slinks away defeated. Fred sulks at the bar, where he comes across the brunette from his earlier car ride and gives the world's worst and funniest toast.
It is my belief that we are brought into life with a purpose. And it is my realization that my purpose is failure.
He continues his downward spiral, lamenting how he had everything with Wilma, but he didn't lose it in just seconds. It was over the course of years. His admission is tragic. He isn't clueless as to why she would leave him, but he can't get out of his own way enough to save his marriage. It's a side of Fred we've never encountered before, and makes you hope he'll win her back by the end. Wilma sees Fred with the brunette at the bar and dances with Xavier to make Fred jealous. At the same time, the Rubbles walk in to see the Flintstones with their new partners, and Betty asks Barney, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" And Barney says, "If you think we should get involved, then no." This is one of the best double meaning jokes I've heard in a cartoon. On the surface, it means he doesn't want to get involved in whatever they're going through. And if you think a little deeper, it references the possible marital affairs with another couple. Xavier kidnaps Wilma and the diamond and drives off with Fred hot on their trail, with him and Wilma calling out each other's names over the course of a 3-minute chase scene, which does have some fun gags in it, but acts as a way to fill time rather than to enhance the special. But unfortunately, the trio end up on a rope bridge over a volcano, with Fred proclaiming his love for Wilma, eliciting the perfect reaction from each of the three.
Oh, Fred.
Oh, Wilma.
Oh, brother.
Xavier finally gets the diamond and knocks Fred out, and Wilma returns the favor, beating him up, saving the jewel, and having Xavier taken to jail, courtesy of the brunette, who ends up being a cop that was searching for the criminal the entire time. The two couples celebrate a long night, but once the Rubbles are alone, Betty gets perturbed, wondering why Barney doesn't rescue her from certain danger. And as they devolve into a feud, Betty threatens to reveal Barney's secret that he's not a natural blonde. A great callback to the Flintstones' first fight, and maybe a sign of things to come if there were ever a Rubbles on the Rock special. In the final scene, Fred and Wilma feel the love re-entering their lives as Fred turns the vibrating bed on. But in one last twist, it's a monkey that shakes the bed, ending with the classic line, "It's a living." The Flintstones on the Rocks marks a time in the Cartoon Network's history where they were comfortable in experimenting with their time-honored franchises. While older properties are now resurrected in radically unrecognizable ways, or treated with such reverence they're nearly indistinguishable from their original iterations, On the Rocks struck a balance that kept the Flintstones within their iconic world, but inserted more contemporary issues and humor that a new audience could identify and laugh at. In the 2010s, Family Guy creator Seth MacFarlane tried to develop an updated, adult version of the Flintstones, but other projects and difficulties making the show feel different from Family Guy kept the development on ice until it was abandoned altogether. Ironically, this movie is the perfect blueprint on how to accomplish just that, and it's unfortunate a series never branched off from it, which feels like a lost opportunity, because this is a hilarious take on the celebrated TV family that I think is one of the most faithful and admirable attempts in bringing one of the most popular cartoons of all time into the modern age. The more spiteful attitude the special carries may be overbearing for some viewers, but if they're able to look past that and see the humor these dour new personalities bring out of the characters, they'll find a product that's considerate of the source material while taking liberties that help it evolve into a new version that could have been the beginning of a dominant reintroduction onto television. It may have been one and done, but when I need a modern take on a classic comedy, I'll take my Flintstones on the Rocks.